Calvinism is rooted in the 16th century religious renewal in Europe that we refer as the Protestant Reformation, which was a movement that started when Martin Luther posed his 95 Theses in 1517. Through this experience, Luther came to grasp with the definite doctrine of Reformation, justification by gracious faith alone. Luther and Ulrich Zwingli, the early leader of the Swiss Reformation, parted ways in October 1529 during the infamous Marburg colloquy, when they could not reach agreement of the nature of Christ's presence in the Lord's Supper. From that time on, Protestantism divided into two traditions, Lutheranism and Calvinism, the latter being the Reformed tradition as understood and expressed in the writings of John Calvin and his fellow reformers.
The Reformed tradition has its earliest roots in Switzerland, with Zwingli and Heinrich Bullinger, who established and systematized it after Zwingli's death. John Calvin, its greatest representative and most influential exponent, established Geneva as a model Reformed city. In many respects, Geneva was the most important Protestant center in the 16th century. This was not only because of the presence of Calvin, but also because the seminary Calvin established sought to train and educate reformers for all of Western Europe. Because of Zwingli's premature death on the battlefield, in fact, that Bullinger's works were not as easily accessible by the later Calvinism tradition, and Calvin's able work in systematizing Reformed Protestantism through his Institute of the Christian Religion. Calvin's theology was presented in this document published in 1536.
A basic tenet is, a merciful God, however, took pity on man and sent his Son to redeem some of the damned. No man was deserving of such grace, but God freely offers salvation to an unspecified number, thought to be very small, of sinners. These fortunate individuals were known as the elect. The fate was determined by God before their births, and it was irreversible.
Calvinists differ from Roman Catholics in the rejection of papal authority. Calvin came to embrace the idea of universal priesthood, in which believers did not need the daily ministration of Christ. Calvin retried only two of the two Catholic sacraments, communion and baptism. The Calvinists share with the Lutherans a dependency of Scripture to discern God's Word, but the nature of the Word was a subject of great dispute. Luther had thought that salvation was based on faith and rejected the Calvinistic conception of predestination. The Calvinists insisted on an austere society governed by theocrats. Both the Calvinists and Lutherans would be at odds with later more emotionally charged Christian sects, in which each group would interpret Scripture.
Calvinism will have a great impact on the development of colonial America, especially in the New England region, where the so-called Reformed churches were dominant in the early years. Calvinism has stood the test of time. Most Protestant denominations that originate in the Reformation were found on Calvinistic confessions of faith.
Calvinism has a bright future, for it offers much to people who seek to believe and practice the whole counsel of God. Calvinism aims to do so with both clear-headed faith and warm-hearted spirituality, which, when conjoined, produces vibrant living in the home, the church, and the marketplace to the glory of God.